Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Wheat harvest is drawing to a close across our state, but there are still several more chapters that need to be written about this year's crop. We begin by turning the page on a group of buyers, taking a look at our state's wheat infrastructure.
Millers, bakers, and several wheat buyers are among the group visiting from Israel. With help from the Oklahoma-Israel Exchange Program, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, and U.S. Wheat Associates, the group is touring sites throughout Oklahoma and Texas. Today, they are at the Robert M. Kerr Food and Agricultural Products Center at Oklahoma State University, learning about the wheat breeding program.
They are extremely interested in what we do with our product development with regards to protein levels, test weights, and what we have for mix times for their products. They're a very technical buyer.
Over the years, Oklahoma has been an important source for Israeli millers because of the high protein quality of our wheat. But competition means we cannot take that relationship for granted.
Because of the closeness and proximity to the Russian and Ukraine market, and with their market development of hard red winter wheat in the last 10 to 15 years, we have lost some of that market to the Russian and Ukrainians. However, we oftentimes are the most reliable markets. They continue their relationship with us, and they know that they're going to get a consistent product.
And this year, that product is exactly what they are looking for.
Protein, protein, protein. That's all we've heard about. This year, protein is going to be a great situation for the state of Oklahoma. They were very excited to see trucks going across the scales after being taken out of the field, anywhere from maybe 13 to 15% proteins. And so it was really unbelievable to kind of see their eyes when this was taking place in the elevator. They're very interested in that.
Kim Anderson joins us now. And Kim, in addition to being our marketing guru, you also teach a sales class at Oklahoma State. Can you explain for us how even in the global market, the personal interaction like we just saw can impact the marketing process?
Well, price and quality are extremely important in marketing a product or buying a product. But even if you look at yourself, we like to buy or sell to people that we like, that we have a good relationship. And if you look at marketing, even in the export market, major markets like with Israel, building that relationship is the #1 criteria. They want to buy from people that they like and that they trust.
Okay. Back here at home, of course, we're winding down harvest and producers are deciding whether to sell or store their wheat. What kind of perspective can you give them at this time?
I think they need to consider two things. What are their price expectations and how much risk they can take?
And what are your price expectations then, speaking of that?
Well, that's a difficult question. If you're looking at, say, over the next 2, 3, or 4 weeks, I think there's a 65% chance that wheat prices are going down and a 35% chance that they'll go higher. As you look out into the November, December time period, there's just a tremendous number of market factors that's going to impact that price. I think that we'll see the futures price go up or be higher than it is right now as we get out into that period. But I'm concerned about the basis because the basis is 40 cents above, 40 to 45% above normal, and I think we could lose that on the cash price. So as I look into December time period, I'm really only looking maybe 25 or 30 cents higher than the current price.
And then what market factors do you base all that on?
Well, you've got to look at our wheat production. The reports tend to indicate that our production is slightly higher than expected. If you look at world wheat production, it's projected to be a near record or record world wheat crop. If you look at corn, over 14 million acres planted, over 97 million acres planted, 14 billion production projected, and it looks like we're going to get somewhere near that. You've got the above average basis. All those factors are negative, and with negative factors, you've got to put the odds on lower prices right now.
And with all this in mind, your advice for Oklahoma producers?
Well, we've talked about it before. I'd sell at least half of it here at harvest and store the other half if I could afford the risk. If they want to sell all the wheat, I think buying call option contracts, they're going to cost you about 40 cents. To store it into December is going to cost you about 30 cents storage and interest, so you're really only risking a dime there. So I'd either sell half, store half, or I'd sell it all and buy calls.
Okay, very good. Kim Anderson, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. We are excited about providing a new level of service in the Tulsa area with the installation of an Oklahoma Mesonet site on the northeast campus of the Tulsa Community College. This site is located between existing sites in Skiatook, Claremore, Inola, and Bixby. Our technical staff set a new installation record by having data cleared for public use in less than 24 hours after installing the sensors. Last week was a reminder of how brutal 2011 was. This week, what a pleasant relief. We can see what a difference there was between these years on a graph of plant water demand for El Reno. At the end of June in 2013, demand for water per day was over 4/10 of an inch. This year, the peak demand at the end of June was below 3/10 of an inch per day. The high water demand for June 2011 came in at over 5 inches above average in western Oklahoma, over 2 inches in central areas, and in eastern Oklahoma close to 2 inches above average. Water demand this June at many sites in central and eastern Oklahoma was at or below average, while drier areas in western Oklahoma were close to 1.5 inches above average. Gary, how does this June go down in the record books?
Good morning, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the fine weather we've had this 4th of July week. I thought I would take this time to go back over June and see how the weather ended up in your area. So let's start with this map of departure from normal temperatures for Oklahoma Mesonet for June. You can see the month ended our streak of 4 straight months of cooler than normal weather. From February through May, June was actually 1.4 degrees above normal, and that's the 34th warmest June since 1895. Here you can easily see the droughty areas across western Oklahoma took the brunt of the hot weather. But remember, the heat index was high across the rest of the state through this period. Next, let's go to rainfall. You can see from this rainfall total map from the Mesonet for June, rainfall varied greatly during the month, from less than 2 inches in the southwest and the Panhandle to more than 8 inches in east central Oklahoma. You notice out there in the Panhandle, however, Slapout had nearly 6 inches, which was very badly needed. Now we take a look at how that compares percent of normal map from the Mesonet. While some areas were well above normal, the state as a whole was still below normal by about 1/2 of an inch. And you can see the southwest and northeastern areas were particularly dry. So we had some decent rains in June. We really need those to spread west once again during July. Now July is not the best month to get rainfall in Oklahoma, but stranger things have happened, as I've said before. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Joining me now, our livestock marketing specialist, Daryl Peel. Daryl, over these last couple of years, we spent a lot of time talking about drought, talking about short term and how we survive that. I wanted today to talk about the long-term situation for cattle producers. Let's talk about the trends that are happening in the industry.
Well, I think as we move past the drought, hopefully, and think about a little bit longer term perspective, there's a couple of things that cattle producers need to keep in mind, and really we can think in a couple of different time periods here. I think, you know, for the next 2 to 4 years, we're going to be caught up still a lot in cattle numbers, the limitations that has on the industry. And then longer term, I think there's even more fundamental structural change that's taking place that'll go out at, at least a decade, if not longer than that.
Well, let's dig into those time frames. Let's start with the 2 to 4 year. What do we really see happening there?
Well, again, we're at historically low numbers, or almost historically low numbers. The drought the last 2 or 3 years has pulled those numbers even lower than we anticipated. So this whole rebuilding process is going to be a real challenge, just biologically from the standpoint of available numbers. But from a market standpoint, it means that rebuilding is going to be an expensive process. And I think what cattle producers need to keep in mind, obviously they're trying to recuperate their forage resource in many cases. They need to take it slow from that standpoint, really, for what's best long term for the forage. And at the same time, the markets are probably going to dictate that we need to kind of take it slow in terms of rebuilding herd numbers. So I think producers really need to give some thought to what is the 2 to 4 or 5 year strategy here for rebuilding their herd and their business relative to what the drought has left them with at this point in time.
All right, let's take that a little further then and look at, say, maybe a decade out. What do we see happening then?
The other thing that's really changed in our industry the last few years, of course, is this fundamental change in crop values in this country. Obviously, we've got more demand for grains in this country, more demand for corn, for industrial use, as well as growing global demand that I think will be the long-term backdrop that's going to be there. That changes the way the cattle industry works, in a sense. We evolved over many, many years in an environment where we had cheap feed grains based on cheap energy to be what we have become accustomed to thinking of. In an environment where long-term we have permanently higher grain prices, that means that this industry has some incentives to rethink the whole production process and be a little more forage-oriented and a little less grain-oriented. That has implications not only for how the feedlot sector works and so on, but it has a lot of implications back down to the cow-calf level as well.
All right, well, that's very interesting to think about, but then for the producer day-to-day on his operation, what does that mean? How does he put some things into place to be ready for all that?
Well, I think there's some fairly specific things producers can consider. It's going to depend on individual circumstances, certainly, but we've already said that rebuilding will be a slow process in terms of the availability of animals, the availability of forage, and taking care of that forage resource. At the same time, this change in economic value, if you will, for forage relative to grain implies more opportunity for things like stocker production in conjunction with, say, a cow-calf operation, or maybe it's a case of utilizing more retained ownership. In all cases, the idea of rebuilding the cow herd more slowly and utilizing stockers or yearling cattle in some seasonal sense might be very complementary in terms of what's best for the forage resource, what's best economically in terms of rebuilding, and where the value in the industry really is. So I think there's a unique opportunity here to kind of do the right things, and really what it suggests is that cow-calf producers maybe need to change their mindset from thinking about how many cows do I run or how many cows did I historically run, and really put more focus on where do I generate the most value in this operation. It may be with less cows and more of other things in conjunction with that smaller cow herd base, things like retained ownership or running some stocker cattle in conjunction with that, where there's increased value now relative to the forage that they really produce.
All right, good information and plenty to think about. Darrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Over the last couple of weeks on the CowCalf Corner, we've visited with you about the concept of late summer protein supplementation for fall-born replacement heifers or for stocker cattle that might be on a summer grass program. Now, if we add a new concept to that, I think it can be helpful. You see, here at Oklahoma State University several years ago, there was a trial conducted to see if deworming would also be additive to the gains that we achieved with the addition of the protein supplement. And so what they did was take a set of fall-born replacement heifers. Part of those heifers were not given either a dewormer or allowed to have the protein supplement. Another group of the heifers were dewormed, and this took place on the 25th of July and again repeated on the 26th of August that year. Another set of heifers just received the protein supplement. That was basically 1 pound of a 41% crude protein supplement, similar to the Oklahoma Gold program. And then the fourth group got both dewormed, as we described earlier, and received the protein supplement to see if these things were actually additive. What they found was that these two management concepts did work well together. The heifers that just got dewormed only had an increase over the heifers that received nothing at all, had an increase of average daily gain of 0.29, and that's pretty substantial. The heifers that got the protein supplement but were not dewormed had an increase of 0.49, average daily gain, 0.49 pounds each day. But the heifers that received both of those had an increase in average daily gain of 0.76 pounds per day while they were on this 84-day treatment. So what this looks like to me is that we can benefit, even in late summer, by deworming these young cattle. It seems to help them better utilize the forage. Add that to the protein supplement, especially if we have adequate forage available, and I think we'll really get these heifers a lot further along the way to being big enough, ready to cycle and to breed when we go into that breeding season for them in late November. Hey, I hope these two concepts will work together for you, and we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's CowCalf Corner.
Now that summer is in full swing, a familiar pest is popping up across the state.
Grasshoppers are thick in many Oklahoma fields, surprising to some producers considering the spring rains, which typically hold down the populations.
We've had 2 or 3 years now of really dry weather, which has allowed grasshopper populations to build every year. And at some point in time, the grasshopper populations get so numerous that the weather processes that we have that can hold them down and encourage diseases to develop, and some of the things that hold grasshopper populations down have just broken down. These grasshoppers get so numerous that these low-level things that hold them back no longer are very effective.
So if you're going to treat them yourself, experts say to get started now.
If you're seeing small grasshoppers, now's the time to take care of them, and if you don't take care of them really soon, you might as well wait till next year and hope Mother Nature helps you out, because when they get big, they're capable of traveling, they're capable of eating a lot more, and they're virtually impossible to take care of.
For a few dollars an acre, producers do have an option.
If you have large areas of pasture and rangeland that you have control over, is to use a product like Dimilin, which you can apply in strips, so you're actually applying at about half the rate of normal. It's a very inexpensive product. It lasts on the grass for a while, so as the grasshoppers are feeding, they take some of that product in, and it affects their molting process. That's the reason I stress that it's important to take care of them when they're little, because Dimilin will only work on grasshoppers that are still in the process of growing up and having to molt several times before they become adults.
Once grasshoppers get beyond the molting stage, it will be too late to treat inexpensively.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we're going to talk a little bit about drilling a tapered hole, or maybe even using a step drill bit.
Why would you need a tapered hole?
Well, if you're a part-time luthier, maybe you need one for your pegs for your strings, or maybe you're wedging something down in that's conical shaped.
Okay, so how do we do that? You can take a drill bit and put it in your drill, and then pick the drill bit that is the size of the outer diameter of your peg at the biggest point, and then taper it on your grinder. Is that correct?
Yeah, the thing that I would do is once you do this, if you determine what your diameters need to be on your taper, then by putting it in your drill and spinning it, you allow yourself to keep the bit centered, and you're grinding it uniformly all the way around.
So that's how we taper one. What we have here is a step drill, and basically it has multiple diameters in steps, and this is for something like thin sheet metal or aluminum. You don't want to use this on some thick steel, but you can select whatever size diameter and you just keep drilling it in until you get to there.
Yeah. But you're not going to use a drill bit like this to drill some kind of a tapered hole that's very thick material, so that's why we would taper the other bit.
So there's some tips on tapering drill bits and making tapered holes.
We'll see you next time on Shop Stop.
Next, we'd like to turn to research, and for more on that, we're going to talk to Dr. Bob Wedeman, Regents Professor for Reproduction here at Oklahoma State. Bob, what are you researching now?
We're looking at how the level of nutrition that a calf is exposed to in the uterus before the time of birth might influence how that calf grows after the time of birth, and most important, how it might influence the composition. Most of the cells of an animal are formed before the time of birth. The only cells that are formed after birth would be a few fat cells up to a year of age in cattle. But all the muscle and bone and nerve cells are formed
before the time of birth. So things that the calf is exposed to in the uterus could influence the rate of formation of different cell types. Remember, we start with one cell at the time of fertilization, and during the first several weeks after the time of fertilization, we have those cells that change into the many different cells that make up an animal.
All right, now take us through the experiment you're using to actually study that problem.
What we're trying to do is look at how the level of nutrition of a fall calving cow might influence the growth rate of the calf in utero, the growth rate of the calf up until the time of weaning, and ultimately the growth of that animal and the composition of the animal when it gets up to market weight of about 1,200 pounds. And so what we are doing is we take animals that calf in September and October and put these on supplemental protein, because during the winter most of our native grasses have very low quality of protein, and so we need to supplement those. So our treatments would be our control cows receive 4 pounds of a 38% crude protein supplement from the middle of November up until the 1st of March.
Okay.
And this is very common for a lactating cow in Oklahoma. Our animals on our low level of nutrition only receive a half a pound of protein every day. And so what we're looking at is how the level of protein to the cow influences forage intake, digestibility, and protein availability to the calf in utero.
Okay.
And so this is happening the first year. The next year we put the animals on the same levels of nutrition after the time of calving when the cows are lactating, to look at how this might influence milk production and how this also influences growth of the calf.
All right, now this all sounds, I mean, we're talking about cows, but I wonder, is there a connection with humans possibly here? Can we learn something about ourselves?
Way back in the early days of the Dutch famine back in the 40s, what they found is they followed the people up to adulthood, and what they found is that when women were exposed to low levels of nutrition during pregnancy at different stages, this could have an effect such as weight gain of people, heart problems, up until old age in humans. And so a lot of the things that we're looking at in animals occur in all animals, including humans.
Very good. Now, where are you at in the research? I know we're a few years in here, but talk to us about where you are as far as getting to the results, getting some information.
This group of calves right here would be our 4th year on the study, and so we weaned these in May. And what we have been looking at is how this influenced the growth of the animal up until birth. And what we found is that level of nutrition during the first 2 or 3 months of pregnancy or gestation does not influence the birth weight. Other studies would show that during late gestation, when the animal is growing more rapidly, the level of nutrition can influence birth weight, but birth weight wasn't influenced. What we did see, however, is that the growth of the animals after birth was influenced, and those animals that were exposed to a low level of nutrition in utero and a low level of nutrition after the time of birth because of the decreased milk production of the mothers on the low level of protein, what we saw is that they had a lower weaning weight. However, if we look at overall weaning weights, those cows that received the control or the normal level of protein supplementation, those calves weighed 40 pounds more at the time of weaning. And this difference actually continued up until a year of age, and that those animals that have been exposed to the greater nutrition after the time of birth, because moms were producing more milk, what they did is they weighed 50 pounds more at a year of age.
Very good. Very interesting information, and we hope you'll keep us informed as you go further in the study.
Well, our next step will be to take these animals up through carcass, and so we can tell you, does it influence the amount of muscle, does it influence the amount of fat?
Very interesting. All right, Bob Wedeman, Research Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Today we want to talk about how you manage a proper hay meadow. About cutting height and proper timing is very important for managing a native hay meadow. On a native meadow or native pasture, the first half of the growing season, 2/3 of the production occurs. 1/3 of the production occurs after July 1st. So it's very important to cut this meadow at the right time of the year. If you cut it later in the year, the growing points are coming up, the plants are starting to put down reserves into the root system for next year's growth. So if you have to cut it later, which is not advisable, you have to cut it a lot higher to not impact the plant negatively. And this meadow, a swather just went by, and this meadow is cut at about 4 to 5 inches high. And that's the least it should ever be cut as far as height. As we progress into the growing season, if we're out into the middle of July, this needs to be 6 inches tall. The importance of a proper cutting height is just like overgrazing. If you graze the plants too short, if you cut them too short, it affects the root growth. The native plants have about a 50% turnover in root mass every year. They grow new roots for next year. So if you cut this too short, it's going to hurt the root growth, and so next year it'll hurt your production. So you can pay me now or you can pay me later. There's no reason to abuse a meadow by cutting it too short.
That'll do it for us this week. We leave you today with a look at the 120th harvest at the Magruder plots. This is the longest running continuous wheat research west of the Mississippi, right here on the Oklahoma State University campus. You can find the results to this year's trials on our website, sunup.okstate.edu. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.